Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Are you dreading your data migration project? 3 ways robotic process automation can help. I'm Teresa Resick, and I'm the director in AIIM's Market Intelligence Group, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And we have a speaker substitution today. Joining us now from AIIM is John Mancini, and we also have Chris Horn from Kofax. Kofax is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them very much for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. Just as we get started, I'm just going to share a few quick pointers for you for viewing today's webinar. By joining live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open, close, or resize the different widget windows that you have available there. And group chat is one of the widgets that are available to you across the bottom. And it's something I encourage you to open up so you can chat with each other as well as with a few of us here at AIIM. And just click on that group chat icon to open that widget up. Do ask questions of the speakers throughout our time using the Q&A feature. We will hold these questions until the end, where we should have about 5 minutes to answer them. You can also use this feature to ask for technical assistance. You may download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list. There's also a few other documents and links in there to help you learn more about today's topic. So just click in there at any time, and that resource will open in a new browser tab, and then you can save it and read it after the webinar. At the end of the webinar, a brief survey is going to open in a browser, and it's also in that widget area below. And I'd greatly appreciate it if you take a few moments to offer your feedback. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's Resources Webinars page in just a few days. And today's webinar is intended to be in a shorter format, only about 30 minutes today. So let me quickly introduce our speakers. John Mancini is the Chief Evangelist and past President of AIIM. He's a well-known author, speaker on information management and digital transformation. He is a frequent keynote speaker, and he offers his expertise on digital transformation and the struggle to overcome information chaos. He blogs under the title Digital Landfill and has published more than 15 ebooks, many of which can be found at AIIM.org/research. Chris Horn has over 25 years of experience providing customer-facing software solutions across several industries, enabling businesses to automate processes and improve operational efficiencies. Chris is currently responsible for financial process automation and robotic process automation solutions within product marketing at Kofax. So right now, I'm going to turn things over to John Mancini to begin our chat today. John?
Thank you very much, Teresa, and welcome, Chris. It's nice to be here with everyone. I moderated a couple of sessions at the AIIM conference recently on RPA, and thinking back to some of those sessions and some of the questions I was asked, I thought I'd set a little context as we hop into this, because I think there's a lot of confusion about what RPA is and what RPA isn't, and I think this webinar will be really good because I think it focuses on a couple of specific use cases that will help put a little meat on the bones, I think, in terms of how you might want to think about RPA. And as I was thinking about this, recently I just completed a State of the Industry report. Actually, it's available outside of the paywall for another 2 days. If you haven't gotten it, you probably should before it goes behind the paywall. You can get it at AIIM.org/transformation, AIIM.org/transformation. And there were 4 points in there that I think set the context for why this combination that we're going to talk about today, data migration and RPA, why I think it's such a cool combination. And the 4 data points that came out of that survey were this. The first one was that 53% of the organizations I spoke with expressed the concern that their organizations faced serious disruption in the next 2 years. Second data point, good one, 81% said that in response they were looking seriously at digital transformation initiatives within their organization. Not so good news, only 1 in 5 were on pace with those transformation initiatives. And then the fourth point is that at the heart of some of the challenges that folks have with their transformation initiatives is the inability of their current information management strategies to keep up with the needs of where they need to go. And 92% of the people that I surveyed said our information management strategy needs to be modernized. And so I think as you think about this, that's what leads us down this path of both data migration and RPA. And so we're going to talk about 3 use cases that are tied to that. The first one is this point about how does RPA connect up with this challenge that people have had for a long time of automating the acquisition of information and data at the point of ingestion. So the way we're going to do this is that I will tee up a data point from a couple of our surveys, and then Chris will basically put a little bit of context around that. And we'll do that in 3 instances. The second one will be this explicit case of migration, and this focuses on some of the challenges that people have in moving data from one system to another. If you're going to modernize, then that opens up all sorts of questions about migration and how you do it, and how do you rewire the house with the juice still on, and all those kinds of issues. And then the third one that we'll tee up is this question of legacy systems, and particularly legacy application systems and legacy content systems, and how do you bridge what seems to be this pervasive gap between the two. So without further ado, Chris, you there? You ready to rock and roll here?
I'm ready to go, John. Let's do it.
All right. So what I thought I'd do is there's 2 data points that I wanted to first tee up about this question of ingestion. And this first one was from the survey, as I said, that I just completed. And so we asked people, to kind of connect the dots between this question of information capture and the digitization and standardization and, I would say, automation of that process in terms of whether it's a transformation bottleneck to them or not. And what came back is that, as you can see here, over 85% the failure to digitize and standardize that process as really key to some of their challenges when it comes to digital transformation. And then this second point, I think, poses some interesting room for some speculation and thought in terms of, what's their response? And so when I asked them, where do you plan to increase your spending in the next 18 to 24 months, these 2 technologies really kind of come to the fore. And I think they tie to that point of we are trying to think about the information management challenge through different lenses than we did before. And you can see multi-channel intelligent capture, RPA, they're really kind of, 2 sides of the same coin, I think come up as areas that people plan to increase their spending in. And so, Chris, maybe you could spend a few minutes, what are they driving at here? What are they trying to do?
Yeah.
How does RPA, move beyond being like kind of a cool term to actually be something that relates to business problems?
Sure, absolutely. Well, let me go ahead and move over to some of my slides. What's interesting there, and those were good statistics you mentioned, John, because it identifies what has occurred naturally of focus in and across businesses, document process focused, automating those, and now the evolution of robotic process automation, which does not ignore documents, but it expands conceptually and places more focus on what would be the knowledge worker at the heart, who's doing handwork as well as cognitive processes. And one of the great benefits of RPA is its ability to automate repetitive tasks, whether these be from a single source point to a single destination point, or the multiplicity of both. For instance, I have multiple, maybe data masters, right? And this or these happen in businesses, unfortunately, and acquisitions is one of the key areas that make this challenging and unmanageable, and also establish or create tremendous inefficiencies within a business. And so RPA can actually take a multi-mastered situation and establish a consolidated, very clean master. So that could be the data migration aspect of it. But if you're in an organization that has multiple masters, maybe for a reason, I mean, there are a number of actual reasons why this would be the case. RPA allows you as a business to not only consolidate, but run effectively and efficiently across that organizational structure. Considering this more around the knowledge worker, and obviously the increased data accuracy that can actually come from an RPA integration, that automation enables the knowledge worker to again which is really what most businesses want deep down inside, to enable their knowledge workers to do more cognitive things for the business, make or be able to, time provided through these automated tasks handled by robots, by RPA, be able to make business decisions, business critical decisions, maybe through insights and analytics, right, et cetera. So RPA continues to evolve. I mentioned up to this point repetitive tasks, but when you then take into account other technologies, some would say AI technologies, artificial intelligence-based technologies around cognitive and machine learning algorithms and capabilities, RPA continues to evolve. So it's taking in not just the automation, but also those document process and content process-oriented activities within the capabilities of a robot. So robots are then able, using this technology or these technologies, to assist knowledge workers further. I mean, a robot could then be created not just to do an end-to-end task, but also to engage on a daily basis with a knowledge worker to assist them, but still allowing that knowledge worker to be more proficient in their daily job, and again, making those critical business decisions. So let's move on. I've got a series of visualizations here to hopefully bring the point home more clearly. So to visualize this further, robots can operate autonomously, processing data, content across business systems, and interact with document processes, and when necessary, engage with the knowledge worker to collect additional information, provide notifications, and so on. Conversely, a knowledge worker could engage in a document process. This would be that multi-channel capture aspect. And you have that level of engagement that has been rather common relative to digital transformation in years past. And through that engagement and those document processes, a robot could be triggered. So an event occurs in and around a piece of content, some data, right, that will trigger the robot to take an action or actions to possibly retrieve data or pieces of content to and from a business system, or move a process with its own set of automations further in what would be an overall line of business process. So with such broad flexibility, robots are being designed to automate many tasks and process-level activities. John, back to you.
You know, it's really interesting. I was thinking about this when I was at the conference this year, and as I say, sometimes RPA seems like a little bit of a challenging concept for people to think about. But particularly your point about repetitive work and repetitive tasks that are done by a knowledge worker. And I started thinking about my own work. And during the course of a week, there's a series of things that I do, which I'm not very proud of them, but it's just necessary in order to get the job done. Where I thought to myself, there's a lot of copying and pasting, a lot of repetitive things that I do, in the context of particular tasks. That if there was something that was easy to use, if there was a bot that could take that, they could probably do it better than me, and I could kind of move that piece off of my plate. So I think you're on target with thinking about that. Second thing we're going to talk about here is migration, and this one's interesting. This is from a survey that we did early part of last year, which is this question of tying governance to data migration. So obviously a lot of concern about governance right now. You start thinking about some of the implications of GDPR, for example, in terms of maintaining control over information at all different phases and through all different systems. And so we asked this question, and I just put the poor and below average points on here because I thought it served to really highlight what was going on here. And so what you have here is that essentially some weaknesses that people identified in terms of, you look at the long bars here, you can tell where they are, in terms of metadata, in terms of effective deletion policies, policies that are automated rather than manual in terms of managing retention policies, in terms of this question of eliminating redundant, obsolete, and trivial information, big bar there. So I think my point here is that maybe you could chat about is that, there's a lot goes on in a data migration project, and maintaining governance throughout that project is an important element in it. And so I think RPA has some stories to tell there that might be worthwhile for people to think about.
I agree. And with RPA, you can take a multifaceted approach to covering off in and around those areas that are critical for a business. It could be compliancy. You mentioned governance, which is an aspect of that. This might be literally the ability to access data within applications. And so let me go ahead and jump into this. I mean, and this could vary across RPA applications. Some are very focused in some areas versus others, but I'm going to speak very broadly about RPA collectively in terms of a solution here. So RPA can automate virtually any digital activity. So if you think of, as you're seeing here, the foray of different access points to which data would be populated or be present or be made accessible to various user bases, these knowledge workers I was referring to before. Part of the challenge is, and metadata was mentioned, yes, but it's just getting access to these different forms of data. The data may seem standardized or normalized, but it's only available in these various applications, which could be different forms. So what RPA is very good at is understanding what these different forms are, being able to adjust, usually in the design studio environments that are provided with most RPA solutions, and can essentially identify objects, fields, buttons within. So in summary here, as you see the foray of various systems that you can connect with, and you think about digital activities in and across these, RPA can automate across all of these regardless of the from where and to where data and content is being moved. Robots can be easily designed to interact with business systems, documents, databases, email systems, to automate these activities and the data within. So it's not just, again, the process or the tasks, but the representative compliance governance that those tasks need to adhere to in many different business operations. And you think about financial services and the regulations there. You might think about insurance, et cetera. So there are business rules that sit behind most of these tasks, even within these business systems. So RPA can, in terms of how the robot is designed, can be built to adhere to that or those compliance, and they can be locked down. So to some extent, not only will the robot follow what it's coded or designed to do, but it's going to do it each and every time the same way, which gets back to not only the efficiency of the automation, but the accuracy. I mentioned data accuracy before. This is accuracy across a broader spectrum. I will point out one other important note. With RPA, and I've spoken mostly around attended operations. Well, robots can be designed to take what's an attended operation today and make it an unattended one. And I also noted in my visualization that you can have both. You could have a robot literally perform an unattended operation to a certain point, is triggered based on an event, to then engage with a knowledge worker, which is now your attended operation, and then go back to running an attended task in an automated fashion against an overall business process. So great flexibility, the way to be able to lock down these activities, these tasks, to establish governance and compliance. John?
I think that point that you're making there is I think an important one about, there people come up with all sorts of fanciful things. I think actually sometimes it's tied to the word robot rather than bot. I think,
Yep.
But But this is about machines augmenting the tasks of humans, and rather than machines replacing humans. And that use case that you talked about, where there are times that these are worked in concert with human activity. These are times that it replaces it in off hours. There's a lot of different variations of this, and it's not just one size fits all when it comes to this. And I think that's one of the cool things about, as people have started to talk about RPA, is there's a lot of flavors to this.
Yes.
So this last one I wanted to talk about, this has been one of the most vexing challenges that traditional content management systems have had, which is this question of integration with line of business systems. And I refer to this as like the two-headed knowledge worker problem, the swivel head that has one screen that has a content management system open, has another screen that has a CRM system open or an ERP system open, and the two don't integrate very well together, and so you have somebody doing these manual tasks back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so one of the things that we asked in this survey that I referenced earlier, and it was a little bit dispiriting when I thought about it, but we asked the same question that we had asked 5 years ago about the question of what proportion of your unstructured content information would you say is stored in enterprise systems instead of in a content management system. And so what you see here is, kind of drop down to the bottom part of that chart, is that it still, hovers around 50-55%, which says that, we haven't done a really good job of integrating our content management capabilities with our line of business capabilities. And so when I thought about that a bit more, came over to this, and we asked this question in the different survey, is how would you describe the level of integration between your ECM, document management, records management, or BPM system with these enterprise applications? And the way to read this slide is that the blue bar is the ones that are not so good. And so, what you can see is a pretty significant pattern that mirrors, I think, in many ways the pattern that's reflected on this slide, in which, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the people that we talk to basically say that they consider it below average in terms of the integration between the two kinds of systems. And so why don't you talk a little bit about that in terms of RPA helping to bridge the gap between those two kinds of systems?
Sure. Thank you. And one that jumps out, just staying on your slide just for a moment here for reference, is the BPM and process monitoring. Yep. And then also the multi-repository search. Yep. Not so much the search, but it's across these different data sets, right, in order to get meaningful results, right, which is what we'd all like to get from our searches. So looking at BPM, and let me switch to my slide here really quick, and I'll sort of give a more holistic view and then jump in just with some specificities around each one of these pillars as need be. But on the BPM side, so RPA, and I've spent most of at least my part of the discussion really describing RPA and its broad capabilities. But what I didn't talk about is how it can and should interact, if not to some extent at a robot level, integrate into business process management, right? It can and it should, in that most line of business systems, one way or the other, have some kind of BPM in play, right? It might not be a complete system, but there's some sort of orchestration of that. Robots can and should automate, again, those manual tasks that were mentioned, and even across the attended and unattended spectrums. But how they interact with business process or processes and how those are triggered, you could start to get an idea of having different types of robots for different types of activities, and that makes sense. And one of those robots could very well be doing a search, for instance, okay, whether it be to provide information to the user in an attended sense, or maybe look for some information within the results of a search for further unattended operation, right, which today might be a manual step or one that's governed and processed by, again, one of those knowledge workers. So essentially, RPA integrates quite nicely within a BPM environment. And there are many vendors that participate within RPA that provide this. Kofax is no different here, but it is certainly something that needs to be looked at holistically. Some start with individual processes, but most discover very quickly, which is what makes your data set, based on the survey, quite interesting, is most end up with looking at the bigger picture at some point. So there's sort of a proof of concept phase, and then let's look at this automation across a much broader spectrum, and that usually involves the BPM system or perhaps systems. Let me just touch on the screen that you see in front of you. I just want to make it very clear that RPA is very capable of understanding, and robots can be designed to interact with a broad range of different types of applications to which data would be utilized through. And I use the term through as I used it before when we talked about digital activities, in that most businesses have some combination of at least 2, if not 3, perhaps 4 of these pillars that you're seeing here. RPA can understand through screen recognition. Some call it computer vision, all right, which is an industry term, at least within the realm of RPA. So whether you have Windows applications of different types, could be browser interactions such that you're looking or searching on websites, Java's involved. You have some older green screens, 3270, 5250 for those more generically mainframe and mid-range computers. And more critically, as a lot of businesses have, use Citrix to literally provision those systems and those applications to those knowledge workers. RPA can handle the entire spectrum, including reading screens off or from Citrix environments. John, back to you.
So I think we have a little bit of time for questions, and we have some of those coming in. But in the meantime, as we kind of distill all those, let me just touch on a few next steps, I think, to think about. You know, as you think about this, I think this has been true for a long time, but it certainly is true now that what you want to do is initiate capture at the very first touch point, and think capture in very, very broad terms. I know people tend to think about capture in paper, but it's not really about that. It's about information and data capture at the first touch point. You know, migration needs to be planned. It's not something that you can just do serendipitously, and that really leads to the next point about getting serious about this question of integration between your line of business systems and between your content management systems, because that's really where you get the most significant bang for the buck. And then I think the last point is that, you know, we do a fair amount of work in the RPA area at AIIM. Other organizations do as well. There's an emerging ecology or ecosystem of consultants that focus on this. It's a new area. It's you know, one of the areas that's just starting to emerge in terms of people taking a hard look at it. And so don't hesitate to ask folks for that. Teresa, I think it's my time to turn it back to you and maybe see what kind of questions we have.
Okay. While we're sitting here looking through the questions real quickly, just want to allow Chris just to speak real briefly here about some things that Kofax offers that can also assist.
Well, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. I know time is precious for all of us, but thank you. Please visit the Kofax website, where you will find quite a bit of information, not only our products, but also case studies and other information to help you with your RPA decisions, including your correlated BPM decisions. And we have several offerings that would help do that, all of which can be wrappered, utilized with RPA. So please visit the Kofax website. Back to you, Teresa.
Thanks. And just to let the audience members know that those links that are listed on this slide here. When you download a PDF of the presentation, you'll be able to access those links, or there's also, I put the links themselves directly in that resource section for you. So avail yourself to this really good information that's here. I have time to try do my best to squeeze in a question or two here. I know we're running just a smidge long. And Chris, I want to ask this first question to you. If an organization is just starting on their RPA initiative, what advice do you have for them at this beginning starting point?
Well, I would make sure you understand your business processes, not just at a system level, but also at a knowledge worker level. And from there, you can determine where inefficiencies exist or challenges or problems exist, and where RPA can be at least first used. And I think from there, you will discover further business efficiencies that can be gained, and how RPA can be more expansively used in that sense as well.
And John, I want to ask this next question of you. Does RPA mean that the organization is replacing their existing ECM and BPM systems, or is this a better way to get more value out of existing systems?
I think, and Chris probably has a take on this as well, but for me, when I've talked to folks that have gone down this path, one of the things I think that's really encouraging to me is that these aren't like great big gigantic software layers in an organization. I think anytime you start talking about a new software capability, people start to think about something that's going to be big. It's going to take a long time. They have all those enterprise kind of perspectives. And the people I've spoken with, one of the attractions here is that it allows you to get value out of what you currently have in place. And simultaneously, in a fairly lean and agile way, it allows you to connect things where they didn't connect before. And Chris, you probably have a take on that in terms of whether these are replacements or augmentations. I tend to view them more as augmentations and pretty lean ones at that.
I would agree, and I would probably also use the term RPA as a unifier, right? Where we have disparate systems, it helps unify those business systems in a very cost-effective manner. In fact, most of our customers see an ROI less than 12 months, which is somewhat unusual, or rather unusual, for what would be the very systems that they're often unifying, because they're much larger.
And I've also heard it referenced that consider RPA a supplement to your workforce, not another layer of technology. There's a different perspective of that.
Yep.
Well, we're getting close to the end of our webinar time here, and we've been listening to John Mancini of AIIM and Chris Horn of Kofax. John mentioned early in the presentation today about this research work that he has recently completed, and again, here's the link to download it, and there's also the link in the resources, and that's at aim.org/transformation, and that's just to help you get ahead of this digital transformation curve, and it's our latest full intelligent information management report. So do go ahead and
just 2 more days before it goes behind the paywall, so don't delay.
And then just the other reminders, check out all the other resources that are in there. Please take the survey. It's in the widgets below. It's going to pop open when we conclude the webinar. I do value your feedback. Very much want to thank our underwriter, Kofax. Without the support from our solution providers, AIM wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs like our webinars. So thank you, Kofax, for your sponsorship. And just as we bring this time to a close, I want to leave you with our speaker's closing thoughts or key takeaway. So let me start first with Chris Horn from Kofax. Your closing thoughts today.
Well, again, thank you, everyone, for your time. Don't underestimate RPA. It's a very powerful set of technologies that truly will automate business and add more, or businesses rather, and add more efficiency to how you do business. So please take a look at it.
Thank you, Chris. And John Mancini of AIM, your closing thoughts?
I guess I would just say don't get too caught up in the name because I think it can sometimes conjure up, images of some robot wandering around your facility. kind of in a traditional way of thinking about robots. Think about these as software agents that can take repetitive tasks and tasks that right now are manual gray areas in your organization. And as Chris said, even down to the level of an individual knowledge worker, and automate those and unify those. And I think if you think about it that way, it's pretty powerful and interesting to think about.
Thanks, John. And thank you, everyone, for your time today. For AIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we'll see you on our next webinar.